I'm going to be reading a little bit from my novel In the Cemetery of the Orange Trees, which is 9 stories set in Gaza. And before each story, there's about a page or two of the American, who surprises me. And I'm going to read a few of those scenes tonight. There's no real order to them. I'll pause after each one to take a break. You need to know, I'm sorry. Bassam and Shafiq are 2 characters in this, and they're my 2 best friends from Gaza. And 2 of the best people I've ever met in my life. They both had master's degrees, but they spent most of their years cutting chickens in a butcher shop and picking oranges. So, anyway. The moment that changes everything for him. While sitting along School Street playing backgammon with Bassam, a small boy stands before them. The boy holds an injured bird in his palm, a string tied around its neck. He throws the bird into the air where it flies a few feet before the string runs out and the bird is yanked downward. In his notebook, the American writes, "Bird on a string." For the first time, he really begins to see Gaza, begins to see himself. That night, while everyone else is asleep, the American doesn't do so. Impossible to even try. He thinks of his past years of darkness and how they pale to those of these people, but still, it is his darkness and he has overcome it. He thinks to the boy with the bird on the string, and he knows, more certain than anything he has ever known, that he has found, or it has found him, his life work. These are the people, and it is their stories, their stolen histories, their secrets, their tall tales that he must tell. This is the greatest thing he can do, he thinks. This is the place he wants to be, but he knows achingly that all over the world there are people like the Palestinians, and that he will not stay. It is May, late into a Gaza night. During the day, any signs of spring have been strangled by the heat, but now, at this hour, with the wooden shutters open, the American can savor the caress of the cool sea air. Usually on nights such as this, when the wind comes in from the west, the American can hear the distant chant of the sea. But on this night, as on so many nights, it is the sound of the footsteps of Bassam that he hears. At first, when he wakes, he thinks it is part of his dream, but then he remembers that his friend is spending the night in the small apartment the American stays in when traveling to the more distant camps in the south. He thought Bassam would like to stay a night or 2 away from Jabalia, but he has been anxious the entire day, and now his pacing brings the American out of his bedroom. Bassam is in the kitchen making Turkish coffee. Couldn't sleep? I'm used to being away from the camp. I'm not used to being away from the camp. You want some coffee? A little. When was the last time you spent a night away from Jabalia? Other than when I was in prison, never. The American watches Bassam lift the coffee pot from the stove after its first boil. When the coffee settles, he places it back above the fire until the foam rises a second time. Bassam turns off the stove and sets the pot on the counter. Why don't you stay in Jabalia? You mean extend my stay? No, stay. While Bassam is pouring the coffee, the American rests his hand on his friend's shoulder. After visiting my family, I'm going to Sudan. Why Sudan? Do you remember when we were playing backgammon and the boy with the bird approached us? Of course, but what does that have to do with you not staying? I can't really explain all this, but it was that night that I knew for certain that telling your people's story and others like it, that there is no greater way to live my life. Ironic, isn't it? How so many people who are free to escape home, while others who can't go back are dying to return. On his final night in Jabalia, the American goes to watch a soccer match between 2 teams from the camp. The players do not wear uniforms. One team plays with shirts on, the other shirtless. The match is physical, tackles are aggressive, harsh words are shouted back and forth. Shafiq and the American sit on the side of the hill saying little. At the end of a match, a fight breaks out between several players and soon spreads to others. The American asks, what are they fighting about? A couple of players on the other team are accused of being collaborators with the army. Come on, we need to hurry home. There is almost nothing said on the way to block number 4. The American and Shafiq hug. I will see you later tonight at the farewell party. Again, they hug. Shafiq walks into the alley, heading into block number 5. The American waits for him to turn around. First, Shafiq's hands and feet fade, then the back of his head. The American continues to watch until Shafiq's white robe also disappears, leaving nothing but darkness. In these, the final hours of his months in Jabalia, the grandmother, Fatima, hands him a metal tub, saying that she cannot send him back across the continent, across the ocean, and to his mother without being clean. He takes the large metal tub, places it on the rutted cement floor of the shower, and stands under the trickle of lukewarm water. While taking his shower, he thinks of what his friend Shafiq has told him just a few days before, that when he returns to his country, his family and friends would no longer recognize him. This will be the indelible scar that Jabalia will leave behind. Drying himself with a threadbare towel, less than 5 hours before the taxi will pick him up and take him to the airport, he realizes the truth of those words. Although he promised that he would stop and say goodbye, Shafiq does not come to the farewell dinner. Instead, he climbs onto the roof of a house and watches the American standing on School Street, alone in the final minutes before the call to prayer, the last minutes of his final curfew. He watches the American silhouette emerge in the silhouettes of those walking up and down School Street to say their goodbyes. There are handshakes and hugs. Even the grandmother, Fatima, embraces him, and tears are coming from the tough young boys who, in a few hours on their way to school and back, will fight the gun-toting soldiers with stones and Molotov cocktails. The taxi arrives, trailed by the thigh-high dust of midsummer. He throws his backpack into the trunk, and there are final embraces before the taxi pulls away. Staring out the back window, he looks down the street and then up at the roof that his friend is on. Shafiq gives him a sad wave of the hand, but cannot tell if the American returns the wave, leaving him for the remainder of his life wondering whether he has been seen or perhaps has been mistaken for a large piece of firewood or a water tank or even a talking goat. The American continues to wander, to gather stories, to Egypt and Sudan, Japan and North Korea and China, to many cities in his own country. Sometimes when alone on a secluded beach or on a mountain before dawn and in bed at night, he thinks of his bundle of stories, the need to tell them and how they have become enmeshed with his, to where now there is no longer a border dividing them. But there is this one, a moment he will carry with him to the grave. He is sitting in the chaos of Gaza City, not far from the place where he first arrived 10 weeks before. It is an April day, and he wishes it would rain, but knows that he will have left Gaza long before it ever does again. This thought, leaving, both excites and saddens him. It is a rare person in Gaza that can even dream of this, and maybe this is not even possible. Can one dream of something that they cannot even fathom? And here he sits, pining about a few months. He is taking a break from many hours of walking. A soldier on patrol looks at him, he at the soldier, both framed by a fruit vendor's stall. The shutters of shops rattle, unraveling to the ground as merchants close for the afternoon general strike. He has another hour to go to Jabalia, and he tries coaxing himself up off his backpack on which he sits. Looking up and through the madness of the city, the American sees a young girl wearing a white headscarf walking over toward him. Shyly, she smiles and hands him a bottle of Gaza 7-Up. He thanks her, holding up her hand holding up his hand for her to wait. Digging into his backpack, he finds a small doll which he gives to the girl. Many times over the years, he thinks of this moment and knows that the young girl, now a woman, still has with her the doll and he the story. Thank you.